Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Vindication. Yes. Vindication. And it feels so good. Vindication. And it's understood that sometimes we're wrong, and when we're wrong, we admit it. But sometimes we're dead right, and then it's vindication. Yeah. Yes. I got to admit, it feels good to be making true crime history. And almost 2.5 years later, we're still doing it every week. Luckily, we have quite a few people, though, helping us along the way. And in this case, of course, we have the amazing Killer Tape podcast that we have to thank for today's vindication. And this is becoming quite a scientific method, guys. We're coming up with theories here, right? This is what scientists do. We're true crime scientists. We're coming up with theories, with hypothesis, and then we are putting it out there and seeing whether there's any truth to it. And so far, we have an excellent track record on some major new paradigms in the Son of Sam, the way to think about it. So we got quite a bit to do today. I want to say, of course, thank you to all the stalwarts out there in the chat, trying different times and different days and seeing when I get the most audience or the least or that kind of stuff. And so Saturday morning doesn't seem to be too popular a time, but whatever. The gang is all here. Yes. So, all right. Well, today's not going to be too long a show. We have some things to get to. So do I have any programming notes? Let me think. Any programming notes? Well, just one. We're going to be starting a deep dive into this whole issue of Richie Sparrazza on Monday, and I think it's only going to be one show because it turns out that the audio is actually very it's weird. The audio tape from the Queen's DA is only like 7 minutes long, but it's like a 30-minute long tape, and after about 7 minutes long it becomes inaudible, which is weird. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use some of my audio magic. I'm going to bump up the levels a little bit on the inaudible portion. We're going to see how far we can listen into it, but it's not that long a tape. But essentially, we're going to be dealing with this guy, Richie Sparrazza. Who was he? Why were the police interested in him? We're going to talk about the Neto shooting, the dog rocket, whether this guy could have been part of that whole deal, and so on and so forth. So it should be a fairly interesting show. And of course, it should be one for the, again, for the history books, because we're dealing now on Monday with a person who Maury outright named was a member of the 22. All right. But you can't have a member of a non-existent group. I mean, let's face it. I mean, it's just pure logic. If the 22 disciples of hell was a figment of an imagination of Maury Terry, you can't have real people belonging to an imaginary group. It's just like, that doesn't make sense, right? So it's like, so we could already say that Richie was not a member of the 22. But he was friends with Berkowitz, and it was an interesting little relationship they had. So we're gonna deep dive into that on Monday. All right, so we got a lot to do today. Actually, not that much to do today, but enough to, well, let's just say, let's get us started, guys. Let's get us started. All right, so Vindication. Well, our video series is the first in Son of Sam history to treat the subject with investigative respect. Okay, now what do I mean by that? Well, we respect not only the subject matter, but we respect the audience as well. Up until we came along, the Son of Sam investigative world consisted of, well, the Moet. Who did it consist of? It consisted of the circle jerkers of the pipe band. Maury Terry circle jerking the pipe band. I mean, that's basically what Son of Sam was until March 2021, when we came in and we broke through. We became very controversial in the process. There, I said it, the process. But we didn't care. We just powered through. People came, people went. in the video series, but we emerged, of course, as the top two in the game. Of course, the other person in that, the other member of that duality or duo is the Killer Tape podcast. They're the only people who I consider on our level. So we were the first people to treat you with respect. We didn't, even when we believed in the cult theory, right? Because we all started out as cult theorists here. I was the biggest circle jerker of the pipeline, right? I was circle jerking like crazy. If you told me like, how do you know that John Carr was involved? I would just point out to you at page 220 of The Ultimate Evil, where it said he was the shooter of the Lomino Damasi, because his hairstyle kind of looked like that, even though Berkowitz had the same hairstyle. So even when we were doing the cult stuff, we actually treated you with respect. And why? Because we actually went up to Yonkers and we went up to find answers. Not initially, but after the first video or two, we went up to find answers. And we went up with an open mind. Even though we were cult theorists, we came across a lot of pushback very early on. And of course, that led us to where we are today, which was changing our mind. But ultimately, it was the evidence that led us to change our mind. And we brought you all along with us. And along the way, we've gone through twists and turns, ups and downs, false leads, promises, starts. We had some trolls come through. We had Neo come through, one of the biggest trolls there were, with his fake caveman. God knows what else he lied to us about. Right. So there were these little bombs thrown into our video series, which luckily we defused before they could do too much damage. And we emerged with the conclusion that Berkowitz, of course, acted alone. Right. So now we're treating you with that respect. We don't hit you up with bullshit about cults and 22 disciples of hell and the children. And we're not talking about how Mr. Real Estate was hanging out with Berkey from Dreiser Loop in a mansion while they and which planned mass murder, and which was it? Because first it was the Way and the Cosmic Police with at the diner with Carr talking in a loud voice about her plans for murder in front of a confidant of Perlman. I mean, Maury couldn't even get his story straight. So once we realized that Mo Terry's cult story was bullshit, of course, we looked for new answers. And of course, we were open to new information. This is one of the things that led us, that allowed us to be so impactful in our video series. And one of the things which we really took pride in is that we didn't have our head in the sand like the moron, right? Like the moron to this day. They're still talking about the 22. Manny, which 22 member did you know? Well, I didn't know any because there weren't members of the 22. Some people have been putting the rumor out that I knew Richie Sparaza. It's absolutely, completely false. The only person who I ever met who said that he had a connection to this whole thing was the usher, a guy named Al Chiafagna, back in 2003. Turned out he was a troll. Turned out in 2020, we got in touch with him and he said that he bullshitted me. So that was the only person who ever confirmed that there was Wheaties around, and it turned out it was a big fat lie. So once we were open, though, to new information, all of which confirmed that Berkowitz was the lone shooter, but we were not satisfied with the talking dog story. Sorry, I read this wrong. We were open to new information, all of which confirmed Berkowitz as lone shooter, but we were not satisfied with the talking dog story. All right, so that's where, of course, we differ from the official story, right? So in Son of Sam, all these years, you had the official story. You had the talking dog, Berkowitz being ordered to kill by Harvey, Sam's dog, and all that kind of stuff. That was the official NYPD story, right? And then, of course, you had the official conspiracy theory, which was Maury Terry's load of horse shit, that an international cult somehow or other ended up in Untermeyer Park, ended up meeting Berkowitz, using this guy, Berkowitz, as their international patsy for bringing down New York City in a reign of terror and all this stupid stuff, which if you just say it out loud to yourself, you realize how dumb it is. Okay? We knew that there was something between these stories, the actual truth, or the new way, a real way, right? So, because we knew that the official story was bullshit and the official conspiracy theory was bullshit, we needed new motivations. New motivations were needed to find out what was driving this guy David Berkowitz. Well, we found out quite a bit in our video series. We found out a lot of new information. Of course, one of the biggest pieces of information we found out, which has gone completely ignored by the moron set, which is that David Berkowitz was witnessed at Peachtree Discos by the DJ who was a guest on our show and who told us in no uncertain terms that in the weeks leading up to Donna Loria's death, Berkowitz was going to the Peachtree. He was witnessed there. He was seen. This guy shook his hand. He introduced himself as Dave. So that, of course, puts a huge wrinkle in the story and changes things quite a lot. Of course, then we learned about the Neto crimes and about all the crazy stuff he was doing in his neighborhood, which was kind of glossed over by Maury Terry. He talked about it, but I felt like his Yonkers crimes were much more important to the overall story than than Maury Terry led us to believe. And it turns out we were right. The Netos were a huge link in the chain in understanding this. We did not get the Neto story correct in the beginning. But again, we're scientists. We're true crime scientists. And at least we're out there doing the work. If I hadn't been out there, if I hadn't started this video series, none of this would have happened the last 2 years. Most likely there'd be no Queens DA dump. There certainly would be no rift in the Son of Sam community. We would all still be, well, circle jerking the pipe band, right? Talking about how Berkowitz was not urbane and witty, and how John Carr was the shooter of Lomino Damasi, and of course how the Breslin letter was written by none other than Michael Baron-Vale, Jarnkowski Carr. All right, so new motivations were needed. All right, so now conclusions, which are now true crime facts, right? Things that we brought to the table in this video series that no one else in the history of this crime has ever been brought out before. It was brought out through the medium of our video series. Yes, we had a lot of people helping me behind the scenes and in front of the camera as well, and we appreciated the help through that all of them gave. Okay. There was no cult in the Son of Sam. Okay, that's a true crime fact now. It's the circle jerkers of the pipe band can still think that there was a cult. I mean, that's fine if you want to think that there's an Easter bunny and Santa Claus. Hey, that's cool too. Don't let me get in the way of your delusion. But the simple facts on the ground show that there was absolutely no cult in Son of Sam. So what's Pokey saying here? I'm amazed that some of the people who were involved in leading the story to the truth went back to the circle jerk. Well, there's a lot to that. Some people who left my video series thought they were more important than they actually were. Didn't realize the work that I did was ultimately the most important. And I'm not saying that I was the best researcher or the most important, but who started the video series? I mean, who got the fans? Who got the audience? Who did all of this? So people got to realize in out there in the world who were former members of this, who may still think that they have relevance, that sorry, your relevance came through this video series, and yet you messed up. All right, so there was no cult in Son of Sam. And Berkowitz, of course, we've learned that he was motivated by his internal frustrations coupled with external factors such as noise. It's actually a very simple explanation. And we oh, yes. I did nothing. Okay. And Berkowitz was motivated by his internal frustrations coupled with the external factors such as noise. And of course, we learned that during the Abrahamson reveal, right? Which Eric and I brought to you every week in Psychiatric Sunday, which enabled all of us to get a much more nuanced explanation about these crimes. One of the main motivators, of course, was Berkowitz seeing Taxi Driver, which is a theory that we were the first to confirm. Okay. Now there's idiots out there saying, man, he thinks he was the first person to ever bring up Taxi Driver and Son of Sam. No, Schmendrix. I was not the first person to bring up Taxi Driver and Son of Sam. I never claimed that. I never said that. It would be ridiculous. There are articles going around about Son of Sam and Berkowitz. I'm sorry, so Taxi Driver and Berkowitz for years now. Okay. What we did in our video series was live on the air. We had Berkowitz's friends, his best friends, Jeff Hartenberg and John Comparetto, actually confirm it for us on the air, live on the air. And then we had, of course, the killer tape. Remember, we're true crime scientists here. We had the killer tape podcast back us up. And a couple weeks ago, we did Vindication with Gary McNerney, where we showed that Berkowitz was indeed, in his own words, influenced by Taxi Driver. And in fact, the next episode that came out after of Killer Tapes goes into it much deeper. And I highly suggest that you guys listen. I believe it's episode 13, where he goes in much deeper into the story. We didn't get that on our first Vindication. So today's show deals with another massive vindication. And this is, of course, how he found his victims' names. All right. Well, the first thing we need to do, of course, is establish a baseline here, because I'm making a claim once again that I was the first person to bring this up in Son of Sam history, and that we have been vindicated. So here is a show that we did in May of 2022. And this show, for all of y'all heads out there, in case you saw it or didn't see it, it's called "What Still Bothers Me About the Son of Sam." It was a live stream. All right, so let's take a listen to an excerpt of that. But Sam Carr, John Wheat, Jack and Nan Cassara, and Craig Glassman all know each other. Well, first of all, that's delusional. Sorry. Let me get I got it. There we go. Okay, now we can start it. But Sam Carr, John Wheat, Jack and Nan Cassara, and Craig Glassman all know each other. Well, first of all, that's delusional right there. Okay. But notice again, we're just dealing with his unfamiliarity with John Carr here. Here's what I think, and I'm going to actually back this up with another piece of evidence. I think Berkowitz got these names out of the phone book. I think Berkowitz looked in the phone book at 316 Warburton Avenue and saw this right here. Carr, John Wheat, 316 Warburton Avenue. Hey, look, John Wheat Carr, 316 Warburton Avenue. It's written exactly like in the phone book. John Wheat. Hey, look, it says here, John Wheat. He didn't know these people, I don't think. I think he got their names out of the phone book. So that was the first time in Son of Sam investigative history that any researcher had ever even brought that up. And it wasn't just brought up out of the blue. It was brought up because we had the evidence of it. Well, first of all, it's very clear if you read Berkowitz's missives and letters that he doesn't know John Carr. He's talking about John Carr being a rapist and child molester. He's also talking about Sam Carr killing people, destroying people, right? You got to remember to put everything into context. Here he is, John Carr, the terrible rapist and child molester. But that's in the same letter where he's talking about Sam Carr is his master, right? The forces of evil of the Carr family. Sam and John have the power to drive people crazy. By the way, there's the same cue that's in the Borelli letter, right? For those who are still keeping score. So he didn't know these people. He was making up bullshit about them. Of course, Maury Terry used this as proof that he somehow knew John Carr. He said John Carr dated 13 to 15-year-olds, of which there was absolutely no proof of that whatsoever in the real world. So he found John Carr in the phone book. He found this listing for John Wheat Carr. It was very obvious that John Wheat Carr is really two people, but because he didn't know them, he thought it was simply one person. So here he is again, aping that John Wheat Carr, calling two people one people, because Wheat was a separate person. He didn't know that. How did he know these people? How was Sam Carr how did he know these people if he didn't know this very simple fact? And of course, he called him Johnny Rape Slayer here. And by the Son of Sam Breslin letter, it had become John Wheaties as a troll, rapist, and suffocator of young girls. Okay, and of course, we were then confirmed this by Sylvia Neto back in the Neto days when Neo and I were going up to the Neto house. And I always gave Neo credit for opening us up to the Netos and never gave him not credit. I mean, I would have gotten in there eventually without a problem. They were such nice people, so open to speaking. I would have just knocked on their door eventually, but he got us in there a couple of weeks earlier than we would have. And the things that we found at Neto were amazing. And one of the things that when we were having a conversation with Sylvia Neto, she told us that Berkowitz got the name wrong in his letter of Joaquin Goncalves, right? It was actually Joaquim with an M. An M as in Manny, not an N as in Nancy. If you see it here, he wrote it with an N as in Nancy. That was wrong. And look at the phone book. It had it wrong. Okay? So here we have two pieces of evidence. It's really Joaquim Goncalves. Okay? So here we have two pieces of evidence that he found the names in the phone book, right? Let's now take a listen to the Killer Tape podcast. Let me just cue up the video clip right here. Give me a second. So the first thing we need to establish is that he did not know the Carrs. Okay, we in order to say that he found them in the phone book, we have to first establish that he did not know them personally, right? The whole knowing them personally of that was Maury Terry's biggest thesis, that he knew them, right? That he was friends with John and Michael, that he knew somehow Wheat, and that he knew these people personally, right? That was the biggest deal with this dude. So let's now see what he has to say about that. So again, this is in Berkowitz's own words. And what we're doing here is we are piggybacking on our research. Right now, we have hypothesis. The hypothesis is that he did not know the Carr family, Glassman, Neto. He didn't know any of them. And that he found their names in the phone book. That's what we're trying to vindicate here. So let's listen to this first clip.
The very next month, in April of 1977, he threw another Molotov cocktail at his neighbor Sam Carr's house and, missing it by a mile, landed in the paved backyard, igniting in a plume of black smoke.
I came across some reference to some alleged firebombing of somebody's house. Did you ever firebomb somebody's house?
Yeah, I did.
When did that happen?
Around April of 77. I threw a Molotov cocktail against the door of Sam Carr's house.
This is Carr's house. Okay.
I admit it was pretty extreme, but it was that dog. His dog is inconsiderate.
David says he threw the cocktail because he found Sam Carr's dog Harvey to be inconsiderate. I mean, who wouldn't be enraged by an inconsiderate dog? Jack asked David if he ever firebombed anyone else's house, and he immediately fesses up to firebombing the Netos.
Did you firebomb anybody else's house?
Yeah, the house on Wicker Street. There was another. Yeah, that was the one. Also had a dog. They both were.
Any other?
So I just want to pause it real quick because he just said that the Netos had a dog too. I could have had a vindication of show about this because during our Neto expose, we got out of them that their dog barked and that they got letters and calls about their dog as well. So Berkowitz was just as obsessed with Rocket as he was with Harvey. It's just that he didn't name himself son of Joaquin, right? He named himself son of Sam. So that's why we never heard about the Netos. But here he is saying that he firebombed the Netos and all that kind of stuff, and that the Netos had a loud dog too, something which we established well over a year ago. Let me just rewind a little bit. Here we go.
Also had a dog. They both were.
Any other firebombs?
I can't. No, I think that was it.
Jack asked David if the Carrs or the Netos knew who was behind the bombings.
Did Carr or these other people know that you were the one doing the firebombing?
From what I understand, after a while they got an idea it was, but they didn't know. I never met them personally.
What gave them the idea?
Oh, it was a whole series of circumstances. It's pretty complex.
What gave them the idea?
But they didn't know. I never met them personally. No, 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 I never met them.
I'm repeating this on purpose.
No, I never met them personally. No, I never met them personally.
So here he is saying that he never met the Carrs personally, right? So by 1980, when he was giving these interviews to Jack Jones, he had already said to the people of the world that he did not know the Carrs personally. So why is he telling Maury Terry that he knew the Carrs personally and that he was personal friends with John and Michael and that they were devil worshippers and how Michael was a devil worshiper and John was a rapist and suffocator of, I mean, the guy did not know the Carrs. He didn't know the Netos. He just admitted it on tape. Okay. So that's one vindication that establishes our baseline. He didn't know these people. So then how did he know their names? Well, he found Greg Glassman's name. How? Well, we're gonna read exactly how he found Craig Glassman's name right now.
One of the reasons that he couldn't sleep, in addition to the turmoil in his own mind and dogs that barked at neighbors' houses around him, was that he had moved in directly above a guy who liked to watch television late into the night and, according to David, played it very loud. David had written him a couple of anonymous, semi-threatening notes without signing them.
The noise of the barking dogs. Okay, you know, I can imagine what you went through there. Were there any other sort of grating, constant noises or anything that would drive you up the wall?
Yeah, the guy's TV sat downstairs and the stereo next door.
Again, David, unable to approach the man with the loud TV, wrote letters and lit fires, saying later, quote, "This man had his TV on too loud. He drove me crazy. I was afraid to approach him," end quote. That man's name was Craig Glassman, and he was an auxiliary deputy sheriff in the emergency services unit of the Westchester County Sheriff's Office in White Plains, where he volunteered in traffic control, patrolling schools, and providing security during community events. He wore a green uniform issued to him by the county sheriff, and he was licensed to carry a firearm. He was also recently divorced, which is why he had moved into the unit directly below Berkowitz, apartment 6E.
The cop that lived downstairs from you, I think he said lived downstairs.
Yeah, he used to play his TV loud. I looked in the phone book and I saw that his name was Craig Glassman. That's how it started. I looked in the phone book and I saw that his name was Craig Glassman. That's how it started. I looked in the phone book and I saw that his name was Craig Glassman. That's how it started.
Repeating on purpose.
I looked in the phone book and I saw that his name was Craig Glassman. That's how it started. I looked in the phone book and I saw that his name was Craig. I looked in the phone book and I saw that his name. I looked in the phone book and I saw that his name was Craig Glassman. That's how it started.
One of the reasons that
So he looked in the phone book. He saw the name was Craig Glassman, and that's how he started. All right. So we don't have him saying that he found the names of Carr in the phone book or Joaquim Goncalves in the phone book. But if he found Craig Glassman in the phone book, chances are he found those other names too, especially given the evidence that we found where he used the name John Wheat, which was in the phone book, and he used the wrong spelling of Joaquim Goncalves, which is in the phone book. This is true crime science right here. This is a true crime scientist working with his other fellow true crime scientists to come up with a hypothesis and then prove it using actual real firsthand data and evidence, which is what we've done. He got everything out of the phone book. Now, I didn't need killer tape in order to vindicate me because I was already very confident in this from other information that I had. But it does feel good to have Berkowitz in his own words, in his own voice, saying that he looked in the phone book and that's how it started. Now, but if you go to the Abrahamson files and you look about into one of the letters where he writes about how he found his biological mother, you will get much more information about how thorough this guy actually was about finding people's names. Now, we're not going to read this whole thing. You guys can do this work yourself. But how I found my mother, okay, I'll go over it one more time and one time only. Step-by-step procedure and general outline. And he lists from A all the way to a T down here, right? Even more down here. All the steps he goes through, showing that this guy is methodical, meticulous, organized, crafty, smart. Okay, so he's talking about his father gave him some names, Falco, over the phone. My dad told me the whole story. Okay, so he's getting all his things. He goes, upon advance of an Alma counselor. Now, Alma is the people who find your real family. I went to the 42nd Street Library to check the old phone books from 1950 onwards. I found a listing for Betty Falco at 902 47th Street, Brooklyn. This was from a 1965 phone book. The number appeared for about 3 years, then vanished. I had a hunch that it became an unlisted number. There was also the possibility that she moved. Checking a recent Staten Island phone book, I found a listing for a Betty Falco on the 200 block of Maryland Avenue. I drove all the way out to Staten Island to meet this woman. After I rang the doorbell, I found that this wasn't the Betty Falco I was looking for. She almost called the cops on me. Okay. So here we have him cross-referencing phone books, not only cross-referencing phone books, going down to the 42nd Street Library in order to do it. So this was a methodical dude who knew how to do research, who knew how to find people's names. Finding people's names in his neighborhood was not hard for him to do. All he had to do was crack open the phone book. And luckily, Yonkers did the work for him. Yonkers had a reverse lookup phone book where you could find an address first and then find the names of the people who lived there. Okay. So it's all there wrapped up in a nice, neat package for us. Vindication. All right, so what are our conclusions? Well, Berkowitz found the names of his Yonkers victims in the phone book. He did not know any of these people personally. This is the main thing about Maury Terry's theory here, that he knew all of these cultists personally. He knew the Carrs personally. He knew all of these people personally. He did not. He had to find their names in the phone book. And as he said, that's how it started. So logically speaking, if you take away John and Michael Carr from the mix, because he didn't know them, right? Found their names in the phone book, just like he found Glassman. Then the entire cult theory flushes down the drain. Okay, you can't have what we know that there was no cult just because of other evidence. But if you take away John and Michael Carr from the mix because he didn't know them, and logically he didn't know them if he found them in the phone book. If you know someone, you don't need to go find their names in the phone book, right? Then there was just absolutely no cult. And our final conclusion, of course, is that Disco Dave was the lone and sole killer in Son of Sam. So anyway, guys, I want to invite you in if anyone wants to call in. Here's the link. I put it in the chat. If anyone wants to call in, if anyone wants to debate me, if anyone wants to give your thoughts on what we presented today, if anybody wants to confront me with new evidence that you have found on your own, please do. If any former research partners of mine who are very bitter and angry want to call in and tell me why I'm wrong, here's your shot. I notice no one's now calling in. These people they all love to like write stuff to each other on their stupid Facebook pages about me, but then like when I actually give them the opportunity to call in, no one's calling in. All right, guys. Well, anyway, all right, so we have quite a bit to do. We're coming up on, I'm going to be putting up the new Apartment Letter 4 show. That's probably going to be next Wednesday. I'm going to be putting together the Richie show today for a Blockbuster on Monday. It's going to be great. It's going to be the clearinghouse for all Richie Sparrazza information that we know. And of course it's important because sorry, I was just reading this chat here. It's going to be important because, again, he was a person that Maury Terry named as being a member of the so-called 22. Off topic, but I have to say, Manny gave Neto the none credit. Everyone in the chat gave him credit. What we didn't all cradle his tender nuts for him the rest of our lives. Good grief. I think I know what that says, Nikosmas. And thanks for it. All right, we got a caller in. And we're not going to give him the flowery intro. We're just going to bring this guy in. He doesn't like the big flowery intros. Book Club Warrior 22. What's going on, brother?
What's up, Manny? Yeah, I don't like the interview. I don't like the big intros, and I don't like any of the backbiting either. But
I don't either. But they bring it to me. Sometimes I respond.
Right. To be quite honest with you, though, like with this Killer Tapes, that's mainly why I'm calling in. Yeah, definitely. Listening to these little nuggets that come out every once in a while, it's it's really good to hear. And as far as this one, again, the Netos were never mentioned because, as we found out when you guys were speaking to them, they were unlisted in the phone book, just their tenant, Joaquin Giancarlo. Okay,
correct.
So
and
that's why they weren't mentioned. The other thing is that the one thing, a little bit of problem I have with the tapes is, they use Klausner and they use Abramson books, and whereas Klausner got the Neto's names wrong, if you go back and listen to that last episode, they use that. But again, unless you're really into the case and you really start looking at it, then that's where you find out. Regarding Glassman, again, another interesting character. Deep down, we all know Dave was a buff. We saw it, helping people out of snowstorms, thwarting robberies at a Radio Shack in the Bronx. That was
right, having emergency supplies,
right, emergency equipment that he made, things like that. Glassman was, for a better term, he was an auxiliary, but in Westchester they're called specials, and they can carry guns. So they are a bit of a step up from, say, the NYPD auxiliary, where Dave had, some experience. So again, it could be jealousy, plus the fact that he, was blaring his TV, the whole thing. He mentions the people next door, the loud stereo, the Williamses, right? We got into that. The hole in the wall. Maybe he got pissed off one day. So, again, all these little things kind of start to fit. Like, when you say lay the foundation, now these are just like, spackle to solidify the foundation of the investigation.
Right.
So, you have to look into all these different things and, take it all into account for what's going on. I believe also, where Dave is talking, again, anything that Dave says, I don't take, I like it, but, I also know that he's a liar. So he got dates wrong too.
Right.
According to the police reports that we looked at, as far as some of that, those crimes that were committed against the Netos and the Carrs back then.
Yeah.
So,
I looked that up. The firebombing that he talked about took place in 76, not in 77.
Right. So, there's different things that you have to, look at. And all I could say is this. From starting to really look at these reports, and I really started doing that when we were diving into Howell a little bit. Now I've been looking at some Freund stuff. You can easily see, if Maury had these reports, how he could use that to just lay, breadcrumbs.
Right.
For people to follow. Now, he doesn't really come out with it, but he gives you enough to make those assumptions. And he, like from last night's show, you're using experts. Well, what makes anybody an expert? Again, if you have a little bit of expertise in the subject, and then you also articulate enough to talk about something, well, who deems you an expert? I mean, I think, we're all guilty of that. Where, like, sometimes I feel a little taken aback when you might say, oh, well, he, because of his law enforcement background, he might be an expert in this. I'm not an expert.
Right.
I have experience. I could look at the reports. I could digest them better than a a layman, and then I can, I can pontificate on it. It doesn't make me an expert. I have an opinion. I have a passion for this case. I've enjoyed it since the get-go, and it's been fun. It's also been sad in some ways, but, like I said, different things happen, and you have to evolve, and you just have to take it for what it is, and it's nothing personal. And I really believe that, people do. I know that, people believe the whole lone gunman thing, but, but it's just whatever. Listen,
Yeah, they can't.
I want no credit. I want nothing. Things change. Everything changes on the fly. So
exactly. Hey, book club.
That's it.
We got a special other caller in. Let's get him on so we can have a three-way here.
Ooh.
Jim Fay back on the airwaves. What's up, Jim?
Not much. How's my audio?
You look and sound great. I've been thinking about you lately. I was like, yo, we got to get Jim and John back on the air. We got to get Rinciari finally getting his microphone working so we can get some good audio.
I had to blow the dust off of this microphone to get everything working.
Yeah, well, welcome back. So what's up, Jim?
Well, the point I was going to make about the phone books is very significant that Manny found that out. For me, that was a tiebreaker, if you would. As far as I was concerned, it collapsed the whole cult thing. It collapsed the whole theory that he was working with some massive group somewhere. And it also, as I said in another video, that there was an incident or two incidents directly involving me after my encounter with Berkowitz in the following with John Rinciari that night. And that there was a car set on fire right across the street from my house that looked like my car, but it wasn't. And there was also a fire in my building in the standpipe hose, which in those days, unlike today, was a very uncommon thing. I'm giving you the Reader's Digest version of the whole thing for those who are listening. But that had it. But the idea that he got those names and numbers from the phone book was very significant to me, considering that I did have some input in the early days of the thing. So I think Manny should get a lot of credit for that.
Well, thank you, Jim. I really appreciate it. And I seem to remember that we were all having a behind-the-scenes meeting on Zoom or something, and it was like 6 of us on the air. And I'm not sure, book club, if you were there or not, but that was when we realized it. I put up a graphic. I think I put up that Joaquin Goncalo graphic, and I remember like all of us were just like this feeling like, oh man, a key just went in and fit the lock. Something
I was there for that.
You were there for that.
Yeah.
Right. So I forget who else was there, but that was a very significant. I think Neo was there too.
No, I don't think he was.
No. But it was 5 or 6 of us. Maybe Comparetto was there. I'm not quite sure who was there, but I remember that moment and I will never forget it. And because that was the moment that it all changed for me as well. So Jim, listen, any other things?
No, I just wanted to make a point to the phone book thing, being that was a topic du jour. And I think, again, Manny has to get some credit for bringing that out. And if it had been brought out earlier by the real professional investigators, I think Maury Terry's name would not be as well known as it is today.
Here. All right, Jim. So listen, I'm going to be in touch soon because I actually do want to get you and John back on for an updated show. Okay.
Very good.
All right. Thanks, my man.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Book club. Any last words?
No, I mean, like I said, in a way, I think it's great that the stuff is kind of coming out now.
Yeah, I agree.
It's all coming out at the same time. I don't know if we've been able to digest it all.
Right.
And, you're still digesting this data dump. So, you can take it for what it's worth. And, people of the other school, they could take these reports and use them to their advantage as well. I've seen it because they're very open-ended. So it's like, but you got to do the work. And it's a pain in the neck because they're redacted. And sometimes you lose some of the flavor of it. But, I'm finding some interesting things. So I guess we could just stay tuned.
Yeah, exactly. So I know that you're probably not going to be on the air for the Freund stuff, but we're going to start getting together, the 3 of us, for Freund pretty soon. And you're coming up with some good observations. And I have a feeling that's going to be that's going to be a great
observations. Like I said, not an expert. I could just, look at things maybe non-judgmentally or a little bit more analytically, and just trying, knowing what I know, just put everything together.
Right.
And hopefully it just paints a clearer picture.
Right. I mean,
whoever
we have
wants
things
to believe what they want to believe, that's fine. I just, for me, that's all I'm about. I was told once by someone, it's about the case. And that's the mantra
Right.
that I use. It's
Right.
about the case. And that's
Right.
all it's about. No personal feelings, don't have hard feelings, whatever. It's about the case.
I try to follow that, and most of the time I'm successful, but sometimes
Whatever.
I slip.
I told you, I've been telling you that for years. You need thick skin, but
I know.
whatever it is, it is. That's all I got. Be well,
All right.
everybody.
All right, book club. Hey, thanks a lot for calling in. We really appreciate it.
You
All
got
right.
it.
All right. Take care, man. All right. Well, Vindication, and it feels so good. All right, guys. Well, hopefully we'll have more of these shows as Killer Tape Podcast continues to put out their excellent work. I got a call in to Bill Badgley to come on to another live stream and update us with what's going on over there. So this is just super exciting stuff. Incredibly proud and happy to be a part of this. We're the team that we got assembled, and the work we're doing is important, I believe, but also a lot of fun, and we're having a great time with it. So I want to say thanks to Jim, Faye for calling in, and of course the Book Club Warrior for calling in, and of course all of you out there in Son of Sam land. I want to say thank you so much for watching, and we will see you on the next live stream. Thank you very much, guys.